All right, that's enough crazy nonsense faces for now. You can try a few more a little later. We get the idea. Jesus rising from the dead felt like nonsense, seems like nonsense to them. Now, sometimes things happen or we hear of things where we go, that's nonsense, and we are right to think that that's nonsense. So if one of your friends says to you, hey, I'm like Superman, I can fly from the tallest building, then you're right to sit them down and explain to them that that's nonsense. Do it nicely, but human beings aren't meant to fly. That's what you need to point out to them. You'd be right to say that's nonsense. But there are other times when we thought something was nonsense, crazy, but actually it turned out to be true. So here's one of them. You might not even know this if you're a little person, but do you know that you come from inside your mummy's tummy? That's where you came from. Now, when you hear that as a child, you go, huh? Nonsense, crazy. How did I get in there? That doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing. It turns out it's true. Sometimes things seem like they're nonsense, and they turn out to be true. Now, here's one for the adults. Just maybe 6 weeks ago or so. One of those doctor professor type people said, oh, well, you know, coronavirus, it's a type of flu. Let's not panic too much. It's not as if the world is going to stop or anything. Sounds like nonsense, right? But turned out to be true. Now we get the idea. Everything in this passage seemed to be nonsense. First, did you notice the women in verse 1? They go to the tomb of Jesus and it appears like nonsense to them. They're wondering, they're confused by everything that's happened, which is not a surprise when you think about it, because they were there and saw Jesus die. They saw the nails like this one put into his wrists and his feet. They'd be bigger than this. But more than that, they saw him die and they would have seen, oh, this is a horrible thought, but the nails taken out. And they saw him, his naked, broken body wrapped in a burial cloth like this one. And they saw where he was laid and that big stone that was pushed against the tomb so that nobody could get in. They saw it all happen. The idea that Jesus could come back from that, crazy. So much so that they spent a lot of their own money. That first Easter Sunday morning, they took some spices with them to clean Jesus' body, to make it ready for burial. That's what you do in the ancient world. The idea that Jesus rose from the dead would be nonsense to them. You see, notice in verse 2 and 3, they went and they found that the big stone had been moved, but they didn't find the body. And when they couldn't find the body, they are wondering what happened in verse 4. Even when two shiny guys, who must be angels, right? They turn up and say, don't you remember what Jesus was telling you? He's told you quite a lot that he was going to die and then 1, 2, 3 days later he would rise. Can't you remember? And they remind them of Jesus's words, and then even then they kind of go, oh yeah, now we remember. Huh? How did that happen? You see, it seemed like nonsense to them until they were reminded of Jesus's words. The women thought it was nonsense. But once Jesus' words explained to them, they run back and they find the men. Now, do you notice that there's a kind of men-women thing going on in this? The women find that Jesus isn't there, and then they go back to the house where all the men are, and we've got all the women's names listed. Did you notice that? We're told exactly who they are. Verse 10, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. What they were told, reminded of Jesus' words from those shiny guys, they now tell to the men. Now, the men are pretty sexist. Let's be honest, they really are quite sexist. They almost as if they go, oh, you girls, you're always getting sad and crying and emotional about stuff. They didn't believe their words, the words that Jesus had told them. It seemed like nonsense to them. Now, what's going on here? You know, Luke, the guy who wrote the gospel in the Bible, was a really clever guy. He was a doctor. And he had carefully investigated all the things that happened about Jesus and only had spoken to the people who'd seen it. They're called eyewitnesses. And he listed all the names of the people here, right? So you could go and check them out. Mary, Joanna, Mary, etc., etc. Later we got Peter. All these people would have been there as Luke is writing it down. And none of them, it seems, went up to him and went, could you not mention that bit where we didn't believe it, or we were a bit slow to get what Jesus had said and that we said it was nonsense? Could you kind of airbrush that bit out? No, they didn't say that at all. You see, the point being made here is that it's kind of normal to think that this is nonsense. And so I don't know who you are and how you are watching this today. You may well be from Trinity Church Sunderland, but you can actually be going to church all your life, be in a Christian home, and still have your doubts about Jesus rising from the dead. And that's kind of normal, because this is weird, right? Strange. And it could be that we're looking in and we say, well, we're not Christian, and it's kind of nice for people to believe, particularly in this time of coronavirus, that actually somebody could rise from the dead and beat death. But it's not really true, is it? Do you know what? You're in good company, because you're sharing the same company as the people who appear in here, the people who started Christianity, who started the church. You've got cathedrals named after them. First of all, thought it was complete and utter cuckoo nonsense. And after we sing this song, we're going to come back and think why, in more detail, why are we being told that they thought it was crazy?